People that have gone to jail/prison or worked there, what are your most interesting, funny, scary, or gross stories? I was a college instructor teaching in state prisons for several years. At first, I was a bit anxious about being in that environment. After all, I was in a room with about 24 convicted murderers, rapists, child molesters, and drug dealers. It wasn't exactly a welcoming place. But, after about a month, I realized that I had nothing to worry about. I was surprised to find that these guys were willing to put themselves in harm's way to protect the teachers. I had just started my lecture one day when a lockdown was called. Our room was locked, from the outside, and we could not move until it was over. We heard, coming from upstairs, what sounded like a riot breaking out. "Teach, get in the corner," one of my guys said, practically pulling me off my feet and pushing me into the corner furthest from the classroom door. The guys then proceeded, without saying a word to each other, to pile all of the classroom desks in front of the door and stand between me and said desks. They were creating a barrier to keep me safe. It turns out that the riot we heard was not as big as we feared, so the lockdown only lasted about an hour. Afterward, once we got the okay and the room was put back in order, I asked the guys why they did what they did. "Some motherfucker hurts you," one of the guys said, "all the teachers will leave. We don't want to lose our education because some assholes can't control themselves." I've worked in a prison for some time in medical. What surprised me more than anything else is how many inmates have serious mental illnesses and below normal IQ. Like, no matter how bad and common you may think it is, it's really bad and even more common. A lot of them don't even belong in prison. They definitely shouldn't be out on the street, but they and society would benefit a lot more from keeping them in an environment where they can get real treatment. Prison makes them so much worse. I'll tell you a story. One time, one such inmate was having a fit and asking to speak to someone from behavioral health. Well, it was night shift and we didn't have any BH professionals on duty at the time. So I agreed to go talk to him. He was black male in his 30s. Past violent offender. It turned out that he was angry because he had gotten moved from one cell to another and his radio had gotten damaged and some of his stuff was missing. He was frustrated and didn't feel like he was getting an explanation. The inmate thought it was because everyone hated his music. "They always be complaining about my music and that's why they broke my radio," he said. And to emphasize the point, he turned the radio on full blast with one of Duran Duran's songs playing. When he turned it off after a few seconds, I remarked, "Well, I think that's outrageous. Who would have a problem with Duran Duran?" That got him. "You like Duran Duran?" That got him. "You like Duran Duran?" "Oh yeah. My sister was their biggest fan in the 80s. Played them all the time, which means I was listening too." The inmate's mood changed and he showed me his property form that had everything and asked me to verify that the radio was recorded as undamaged on the form. As I looked at it, I noticed that he had a box of crayons listed among his property. I asked him what sorts of things he draws and colors. The inmate pulled out a folder containing some blank coloring pages that he had of various things. I saw one picture of an owl and mentioned that I like owls. He told me he'd color it for me. "I'll tell you what then. If you will promise to color that owl for me, I will come back tomorrow and visit you to see how you're doing." Deal. He agreed to it. The next day, I showed up and the guy was absolutely jubilant. The owl was perfectly colored and he insisted that I take it. He couldn't stop talking about it either and he remarked somewhere in the middle, "All my life, my folks told me not to trust white people, but you did what you said you would." It was such a small damn thing, and it mattered to this man to the point that it made him question the negativity that may have led him to the hard place he found himself in. I will never forget how happy he was right then. For my part, I still have that owl picture hanging on my refrigerator. 6 months county jail. I never went to the big leagues. Every other arrest was Maine, overnights, weekends, and another very short county stint. Anyways, I was on kitchen duty and they have outside employees as well working in the kitchen, every single utensil hung on a board in locked cabinets. They were huge and there were 3 of them. We cleaned up after each meal and every single utensil had to be put away and then the co's checked to make sure there were no missing spaces. Then we went back to the dorms, big rooms filled with bunks that held like 40. After dinner there was a potato peeler missing, the guards make us look for it. We go through trash, everywhere and it doesn't show up. They say we can't go back until it's found, so once again we look and they have us looking behind everything and looking in places that you would have to hide or throw something into to get it there. Still find nothing, now they are pissed. They say that there will be no repercussions if whoever has it will just drop it. The co's even walk away to give the person a chance to drop it. Still nothing, and at this point guys are pissed and saying whoever has it to drop it so we can all go. The guards are heated and are threatening everyone now. Finally at like 1 a.m. they let us go back to the dorms with the promise that we are all accountable when it shows up. Next day it's like nothing happened. Turned out a lady who worked there had accidentally taken it with her back to their locker room and didn't realize it. She was fired. My time to shine. In my younger days, I may or may not have spent some time in a county jail, time served, never actually went to prison. Now, this country jail was severely over capacity. So much so that the mess area was used as overflow, and about 40 of us had to sleep on bunk beds they'd plopped down in the middle of this big room. Unfortunately, this area had no toilets of its own, so they left one cell open and unoccupied for a toilet for all of us. Bad jail food, 40 dudes, 1 toilet. Not a movie anyone wants to see. Well, I dropped approximately 1/5 of my body weight into that poor toilet, in one extremely dense log. This, much to the chagrin of the guys on the bottom floor cells, caused all of their toilets to back up somehow, flooding their cells with shit water. The guards made us wait outside in the exercise area while plumbers came in. This all happened at like 11:30 at night, in January. No one knows it was me that clogged it all up, which is probably a good thing. TLDR, got poop water all over a bunch of literal felons. I've been out of prison for a decade as of July 5, 2021. Once was enough for me, even if it took 5 years to realize it. I was young, barely 18, and ended up on one of the gladiator camps in TX, the Roach unit. From there, I ended up in administrative segregation the All Red unit for close to 3 years, until I discharged my entire sentence, a riot against the guards. Seg is nuts. On a best case scenario, you spend 23 hours a day completely alone, and an hour in a small cage that is open to the sky. That rarely happens, because staying out of trouble with the guards is hard. Realistically, you just spend 24 hours a day alone for years on end. The craziest things I saw in my time in segregation, the guards are often corrupt and malicious. With the rate of illegal contraband alone, you can't really argue it. One of the sergeants decided not to feed 2 black guys. At first he skipped them for a meal, then a full day. Both of these guys had life sentences, one for a robbery that led to someone dying, one for murdering his children. They were all out of fucks. They coordinated with the rest of the people on our run. Each run had 14 cells, 7 below, 7 on the second floor, to make noise all night. So, we all pounded on our doors, yelled, whatever, basically all night. The guards can't really do much to stop something like that other than yell. While we all made noise, these 2 guys jumped on the steel tables bolted to their walls till they busted off. Then, they used the tables to hammer on their door frames at the bottom, breaking them off the tracks. Nobody noticed, because again, the guards basically just ignore your existence back there. So, lunchtime comes. The sergeant shows up with 2 cops. An inmate on the second floor called them to his cell door. While they talked to him, the other two guys pushed their doors open. My father spent 30 years of his life working in 2 prisons, first as a head of a penitentiary department in half-open facility. Not sure of proper title, he was responsible for inmates' evaluation in a specific block, and then as a warden of a closed one, for more severe, dangerous cases. Here's some of what I heard from all those years. It's probably gonna get buried, but I kinda wanted to drop it off my chest for a while. This happened in Poland. There was one time a semi-successful attempt of an escape by an inmate, who before count managed to build a simple structure to climb a wall, and threw multiple blankets on a barbed wire to get over it. The prison was located in the middle of nowhere, with fields of wheat surrounding it. As he made his run into fully grown field, a guard from a tower noticed the man and started, at first, shouting warnings, to then fire a warning shots into the air. With no response whatsoever, he fired exactly 1 round in the direction of an escapee, who was well in his way into the field. The guard managed to get a direct hit with AK-47, a standard choice of weapon for this position in Mid-Eastern countries, into the man's leg. This happens from a distance of 400 m, early in the evening with reduced visibility. The inmate fell on the ground immediately. The shot was so precise though, it ripped his arterial vein apart, and he managed to bleed out before ambulance could arrive, sadly dying on the spot. The guard, however, was awarded for his deeds, and most importantly, the golden shot he made, as everything was going by the protocol and a death of an inmate was necessary last resort he could have called for. He was well known in the crew for this years after the incident for his sharpshooting skills. Shook his hand when I was a kid. Lovely looking guy. You wouldn't say he can take someone's life. A man once barricaded himself in the cell. This is, for a context, a very stressful situation to be in, as in such case you need a negotiator on scene, and it's generally considered a high-risk situation because of the possibility of self-hurt. If you just wanted your workday go by, well, it's one of the moments it all goes down the drain and every single person in the building is gonna ask questions, not to mention people above. This is speaking from a perspective of a position head of penitentiary my father had. The fault falls into his hands, as in, why did this happen in the first place? Anyway, as the negotiations went south, and the man stalled, having some demands about something that was never going to happen, the call was made to break into the cell and pacify the troublemaker. I might add, he was threatening to cut his throat the whole time. The guards loaded special ammunition into their shotguns for breaching such doors. Few blasts, and they went in. This is when the shit day got even worse, as they found out the man sitting on the chair in the middle of the room has managed to literally nail his ballsack into the said chair. This is the self-harm I was talking about, and it adds another layer of complexity because now you need a doctor in scene, which prolongs everything, and the inmate can get a permanent health damage. To make matters even more complicated, the gentleman twisted the end of the nail below the chair so that he couldn't be forcibly removed from it by the guards, essentially attaching himself to it. The inmate was known for his psychological instability, and surprisingly was in the middle of serving a 3-year sentence for alimony. I vividly remember my father talking about as he, I think, was mostly shocked what humans are capable of doing to get their attention in desperation. If I remember correctly, despite long-ass week of reports and explaining for my father, the man has had his passes revoked and another year or 2 added to his sentence for this behavior. They managed of course to get him off the chair in the end and everything, but it's one of those days that add a pack of gray hair onto you. During a yearly training of the hostage situation at another prison, a SWAT team was invited to participate first time around. This was a novum, as before it was more of a standardized walkthrough of a protocol, so that everyone knows their cans and can'ts should the situation arise. Sadly no one cared to inform the unit they are training with civilians, specifically a middle-aged beer-belly gentleman, who just want to get this done and go back home watching ski jumping. Some of said gentlemen played the terrorist side in this, and as you can expect, the purpose was to raid them. During the first breach practice, the SWATs went with full force through the windows, down from roof, knocking down glass and throwing flashbangs onto the scene upon landing. If your job was pushing pencils all day around, you can imagine how unprepared those folks were when this happened. 2 people got to the hospital with severe glass damage to their face. Other 2, friends of my father, had the grenades blow up nearby their ears, essentially rupturing their eardrums. Both of them don't hear on one ear to this day. Slow government job? Well, as you can see, not very much in certain times. I'm pinpointing not really as someone's mistake in this situation, but rather a misconduct that was a prevalent part of this job, putting you at high risks in the moments where you really couldn't expect it. It's one of many cases where documents and signatures were more important than you, and you were forced to play an unfair game against the institution. I have to add the practice was obligatory. Okay, last one, and frankly it's the weirdest one to tell. It's not so obviously disturbing, but when I first heard it I had shivers on my back, probably because I could see my father's eyes while he was talking about it. So as a warden, he gets a visit from our country's intelligence agents. It's a typical Tuesday, you show up at work, and after your rounds and quick coffee, the secretary calls there are 2 unscheduled gentlemen waiting in front of your door from the agency. The agency is kind of a CIA type of thing. This already doesn't smell good, because what the hell they want from a prison full of already sentenced people? The gentlemen walk into my father's office, and generally this is how the conversation goes. Mr. X? They start. Yes, good morning. We are Agent Y and this is Agent Z from the agency. Going straight to the matter, they continue, we are aware you had a new shipment of inmates yesterday's afternoon after around 4 p.m. Yes, we had. Among those men there is one gentleman, listed as Mr. B, with a sentence of 8 years for murder. That is correct, yes. And he is designated for sentence in a wing in solitary cell. Yes. Mr. X, what you are about to hear is for your ears and your deputy ears only, and he's already been informed. Said gentleman is not really Mr. B, as this is his operative name, as a Russian intelligence officer. This is a national security matter, and this gentleman is under our observation. Agents hinting at my father, the guy doesn't know his cover is blown, then they continue, under no circumstances. I repeat, no circumstances, anything bad can happen to this gentleman. After a visible break of confusion, I understand. He is now under your responsibility, and we will monitor the situation, as well as you. Again, do not discuss this subject with anyone else. Is everything clear? I suppose, yes. Good, then have a good day. And so they leave. So this looks straight from Hollywood movie, but from a perspective of a rather hard-working, everyday guy you just got mixed into something smelling so bad, it goes for miles. For starters, in a closed prison for people with the worst sentences, you really can't guarantee anyone's safety 100%. It's your job, of course, and you have to try anyway, of course, but let's be honest, if someone wants to do something, they will find a way. As a warden, you are responsible for your inmates' safety. But you've seen TV shows, you know how this works, it really often does. So you come back home with a stress of, 1. Trying to do impossible, overreach your capabilities as a chief, to protect a man you don't care about. This is expanded by the fact that now you might have to do things you can't rationalize to anyone, and will, for example, put your subordinates' trust towards you at risk. 2. Being investigated, wiretapped, and listened to. 3. Not knowing what consequences a failure will bring. I never heard how this one ended, might be that the matter simply dissolved over time. But I certainly wouldn't want to be dragged into national manners on my normal weekday job without my consent. This just happened there, and where wasn't even an option out. There were so many more, but let's end here. Mostly writing this for people to see that the very institution that I guess strives for certain stability, is inherently an unstable one. If you'd think this can be a steady government job, it's really not. Maybe different countries have it better? There is also a chance all of this was a big revelation to me back when I heard it, because for years I thought Father is having a very boring job. He only started talking after retirement and quite a few drinks.